So, having said that, I'm well aware of all of that, and I would never put any other speech therapist in a bad position. I simply just offered, please watch Speller's documentary, really as an educational tool. I'm happy to host sort of like a parent-staff evening where we could just all watch the movie and talk about it, because getting ready to blow up, it's up and coming. There's so many people that came before us, but now it's getting ready to explode exponentially because it's helping so many people, including Colin. But they were not willing or open or comfortable even having a screening of the documentary in the school, which is a shame, because I really wanted to share how Colin was communicating, because it could have helped so much. And then over the course of the year, I basically just asked, well, again, I'm not asking speech therapy to deliver services, but can his one-to-one just literally hold a board at a 90-degree angle so he can communicate? No. It's pretty messed up.
So, and it goes along with, so many things are flying through my head as you're saying that. Okay, this is a school for autism, where they should be meeting every child where they're at.
Yes.
And advancing them. And we all know that no one person, whether autistic or not, learns the same way.
Right.
So communicates the same way. So it kind of flies in the face of what these schools are supposed to stand for.
Right.
And not just a school for autism, but private schools, of meeting your child where they're at, individualized learning, that's not happening. Again, I hate to be sinister or cynical, I guess, is why would you be so opposed to it? Why would you be so adamantly opposed? Now, when you said about I'm pronouncing it wrong, ASHA, when you're saying that when you go to their homepage, the first thing that flies in my face is CDC's homepage.
Yes.
Vaccines do not cause autism. If you are coming out so vehemently with a stance, it's usually because that stance is true.
Yes.
Right?
I agree. Yeah. And, it, as you have said so many times, if it helps one kid, I would be so happy if I found anything to pass along to a group of people, and if only one person out of those 25 parents, it helped their kid, I would just be over the moon that it helped their kid. I wouldn't be poo-pooing it or making it my life mission to speak out against it because Colin didn't respond to it.
Right. It just is
mind-blowing.
Yes,
and what it brings us to is a crossroads in Colin's education where, well, he's not going back to school, because when you have a person, Colin's 17 years old. He's going to be 18 very soon, in a couple months, technically an adult by age and by everything. Colin's intellect and cognitive abilities are 100% intact. We know that. He does not have an intellectual disability. He has a motor planning disability. He has epilepsy. He has mitochondrial dysfunction. He has a whole slew of other things that were caused by vaccine injury, but he does not have an intellectual disability. And it's important for that to be said over and over and over, because it validates his need, his desire and need for rich, age-appropriate content. We've talked about that over and over with school, how important that is. He, for better or worse, because we live in a really crazy, unstable world right now, very frightening time.
For sure.
But for better or worse, Colin wants to listen to current events, and he wants to monitor what's happening in Israel and Gaza regularly. He, understands the war very well. He understands that Hamas and Hezbollah are the terrorist group and what's happening in Iran. He understands really big, complex things. So when he goes to school and they're talking about, I don't know, the Four Seasons, and he's asked to cut the squares from the piece of paper and glue it on the right, or talking about the Thanksgiving story that is actually made up, we know that. It's not accurate history.
But then on top of it, though, with all of that, you're not allowing a child to express themselves in the communication format that works for them or is working for them.
So we know that people in general, I have a high level of anxiety, right? There's a lot of people, I'm sure most of the patients you work with have a high level of anxiety.
Yes.
We also know that our autism community, like 99% of them, if not all of them, have anxiety. Rightfully so. They are competing against a lot in our neurotypical world, right? So when you have this person who has a high level of anxiety, he is, overwhelmed by just the presence of too many people in his space, and the sounds and the, we talked about the overhead lights at school and things like that. And he doesn't have the means to communicate properly. And people just keep coming at him, right? So he starts escalating, and what happens? More people are called in. And then the nurse comes in to give him medication because it's right after lunch. Another person coming at him. Probably the nurse should have stayed back, right? Probably anyone in that room who knows my son, because he's been there 8 years.
Yeah.
Or who maybe doesn't know him, but just understands body language and energy.
Right.
And being aware, like any practitioner or therapist should always be down here. They should never match the energy, right? This is just I feel like, escalation control 101 or whatever.
Well, and from several years ago with Colin, when he would start to escalate, he liked to go in the room by himself.
Yes.
And they didn't even need to close the door.
Yeah.
He just could be in there, kind of walking around by himself.
Yeah.
That didn't happen.
And it didn't. I'm still really quite upset and traumatized by what did happen. So I'm not going to disclose it in this discussion. We'll talk about that privately.
Okay.
He's also very traumatized and sad and embarrassed and feeling ashamed, a lot of big feelings. But what I will say is that it was, I think a combination of fear-based and BCBA protocols that are outdated.
Gotcha.
And I have a lot of friends that are BCBAs, and I respect them very much. I've asked for, a review and a updated behavior protocol, because less is more in this situation. You're not going to, I just remember on the very most simple level when I was like a child, just like a little kid on the floor in my bean bag, and all the adults think you're super cute and like want to tickle you and hug you or whatever. And I don't know, maybe it was an insecurity, maybe it was my own sensory issues, maybe it was control issues. I have no idea. But every time that happened, I would scream and be like, get off of me, because it was like claustrophobic and it gave me anxiety.
Yeah.
So that's like the most simple level. So imagine if you're in full-blown crisis and then there's just more people and more people and more people and more, you know what I mean? It's not a good match any longer, and it is what it is. And I have a a lot of love and respect for these people because I know that they have good hearts and want to do what's best for the kids in their care at their school. But I think that the high school piece of it is very new, uncharted territory, and they need support in how to manage not just Colin, but a lot of other things.
Yeah.
You know,
I think when you had reached out to me about, you know, just stating that an incident had occurred, I was like, what? Because we haven't had that in a really long time.
Yes.
That was something years ago when we first started working together that was pretty daily, you know, for him. And then it was like, then it became the exact, like, when something like this happens, like, what in the world? This is so foreign to how his behaviors have been.
Yeah.
So I always say, too, as hard as it is to go through and mentally, emotionally, physically, the toll that it's taking on you, it's taking on Colin, on Aiden, is I am a big believer in there are no accidents. So this happening brings you to the decision of something's got to change.
Right.
You know, I always go back to Dr. Phil saying is, okay, how is what we're doing working?
Right.
It's not. So we got to change something, you know. And again, kind of backing up to what we were talking about with the spellers, again, I always say, it's why I created a wellness center. I always say, you don't have to see me, but I want to be able to offer something that you could benefit from. You know, I always say, I'm not a martyr to what I do, but if there's something that could help you that I could make available, well, that's the goal. Also, I sometimes have patients that say, you know what, I'm going to take a break from seeing you. I want to try this. And I always say, absolutely, like, please do. You know, I want you to try that. I want wherever the healing is going to occur. Ultimately, they end up back with me. Right. And I don't say that in a prideful way. I just know with the tools in the toolbox here that I use that we get a lot of healing that
you have
that occurs.
It's powerful work.
It's really cool work. It's really, I have a patient, I have the whole family, lovely family. And I will say that they've been my family for years. Dad was the last one to become my patient. Just really good people, and we had an appointment this morning, and he just broke down, and he was like, I left last weekend, and I was like, wait, what? And so I've been talking with him they have a nonverbal, vaccine injured nonverbal. He's now 5 years old. I've been working with him since he was 2. Then they had a baby. The baby's now 16 months old. Okay. Just since she turned a year, just slowly, I think maybe you and I have talked before about how when there's a family, it's hard for me that has a vaccine injured child, that they then continue to vaccinate their other children or things like that. And so I always have to keep myself in check, you know, when you're saying about not letting your emotions match what you're dealing with kind of thing. But that's one where just recently, since the baby who had turned a year back in September and has just had chronic ear infections, and then through body code, I'm like, we've got some aluminum toxicity here. We've got some vaccination toxicity from this age. They have finally come on board and said no more, no more God. For any of their kids, because I think they see if they were going to continue to do with the baby what they did with the now 5-year-old, they're going to now have 2 children in this situation. And getting them to go gluten-free. We just went gluten-free in December with the 5-year-old. Again, people have to come to this on their own. He's like a different kid since he went gluten-free. He's not raging. He's not banging his head. He's not trying to climb out of the windows. He's not trying to run out the doors, you know. But I say all that to say the dad this morning was like, yeah, I left over the weekend. Like, I just couldn't take it anymore. And I said, look, we've talked about this before. Like, having a child like so-and-so is not easy. It's 24/7. And as the man of the house, you're kind of expected to fix this, you know, and then you've got a baby, and then you've got an older child. He's 8 years old, you know, it's just, it takes its toll. But again, him kind of leaving for the weekend was a bit of a wake-up call and a realization of like, I've got to get myself together.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so we put in place, I said, you know what, we're going to keep working together, because we have been, but he's now seeing me every 2 weeks. He's like, I got to stay on top of this. And then I gave him the therapist in my office, her number. I
That's
said,
great.
you gotta, you know, be able to have somebody to talk to. And so anyway, I'm going off, but I say all that to say, as I'm a big believer in as many pieces of the puzzle that can be in place to help somebody get well.
Yes.
That's what needs to happen.
Yeah, and which separates you from so many practitioners right off the bat. But I will say, I think everybody in our community, all the practitioners like MAPS and, you know, our extended sort of naturopath, homeopath, functional health community, they are all exactly what you just said. You know, they are those people, which is probably why they're in our community. You know what I mean?
Right.
But going back to the example you just said, the dad's feelings completely validated. And thankfully he had you to give him the great sound advice. And that's the important thing, is that, you know, we are caregivers. It's hard as hell. It's emotional. It's physical. It's psychological. It's, you know, financially burdensome, because it's things that the average Joe might not think of, right?
Well, when you bring that up, he said that too. Now he has a good job, but mom is home full time, and so we talked about that. I'm like, your concerns are valid. You now have a 5-year-old that's still in diapers, and we don't know when or if he won't be in diapers. Diapers are a large expense, you know, so you're faced with these situations that if you don't understand what it's like, and there's no escape from it, you know. So we were talking a little bit ago when you were saying about Colin having some issues with sleep here lately, and 3 hours of sleep last night. My mind immediately goes to, first, oh, poor Colin, what's wrong? Let's see what we can figure out. And oh my golly, poor Diana. If Colin got 3 hours of sleep, that's all Diana got.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
Because it's not like you're going to be able to lay in your bed sleeping soundly knowing that your son's awake.
For, you know, some of the families out there, most of the families listening are probably in our community. Maybe we have some stragglers, some family members, some people that are just curious or new to the community, special educators, whatever. But for the most part, you know, it's not like 17-year-old boy can't sleep. He's just going to chill in his bed and read his book or listen to his iPad. That's not what's happening.
Right.
Now, Colin is listening to his iPad, but it's really loud, and he's very vocal, as if it was like 3 p.m, but it's 3 a.m.
Right. And I would imagine too, again, with this, and when their amygdalas are imbalanced there with that fight or flight reaction, I don't know, this is how I would feel, of like, okay, but is there going to be something that's going to be a trigger that's going to make him fly, you know, like, to get up. So again, I think of that. I know another patient of mine, 16-year-old, the parents alternate their sleeping arrangements. So it's kind of one night mom sleeps in the room with the child. The next night dad does, just so that at least one parent can get sleep.
Yeah.
It's, I don't think I think there's just so many dynamics to it, and I think some of the things too, we always joke that we could talk forever and ever, but my thing that my husband and I talk about a lot is we're seeing more and more and more of this.
Yeah.
And what does this, and we've talked about this before, what does this future look like for caregivers like yourself, for these kiddos who are now going into adulthood? I think my big thing is just the caregiving, of it all.
It's true. And I'm so grateful for you and for your husband for you're just such kind, loving people. Of course you are. You're both physicians, but you have that just big, you naturally care and think about situations like this.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, I don't want to say most people, a lot of people don't. They just go about their day and their biggest care is their outfit or their hair, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I do recognize when people do try to reflect
Mm-hmm.
and understand and want to try to be part of, I don't know, brainstorming or solution and beyond the healing. What else does it look like? And I will say, because I do work after 7-year hiatus, I did go back to work. And it was supposed to be part-time. It's not what I would consider part-time.
Right.
Of course, it's in human services, so that's never part-time.
Right. No.
But it is where my heart is.
Yeah.
And but what I work with adults with disabilities, and so I love it. I feel really this is where I thrive, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have also unequivocally acknowledged and seen firsthand that there is nothing for Colin's generation and his friends and peers with regressive autism.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing after
Right.
high school.
Right.
And again, it's not because of an intellectual cognitive disability. It's because the presentation affects every aspect of their life. Safety, motor skills, complex medical thing,
Mm-hmm.
You probably have seen an uptick in epilepsy as your patients get older too.
Yep.
So
Yeah. Which just throws a whole new wrench and fear.
Yeah. I have a consult with a MAPS doctor. He's in Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine.
Yep.
I'll get to Rhode
Make
Island.
it happen. Yep.
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 But it's again, things that, the average Joe wouldn't really think of. They would
Right.
just go to the local hospital and,
Mm-hmm.
but, it's just layer and layer and layer of complications of
Mm-hmm.
things. And it's,
Well, and I think one of the things too with, when we look at this population too, is keeping in mind they are still growing and developing like neurotypical, teenagers, right?
Yeah.
So the hormones are still just as much at play as they would be in someone neurotypical. And I think sometimes that gets lost, because sometimes when I'm dealing with kids with autism or things like that, and they'll, have some aggression or something like that, and I'm like, well, their hypothalamus is imbalanced or their pituitary gland, which is age appropriate, these things are gonna happen. I think sometimes in the autism community, it's just so quick to be like, oh, but I think sometimes we need to be like, no, this is typical. This is typical teenage behavior though too,
Yeah.
But I think that it's just overwhelming, kind of going back, with the conversations that my husband and I have, are, okay, this is the issue, this is the problem moving forward, but why is this an issue, and why does this continue to be a growing issue? you know how I feel about it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's kind of a joke in our household that I'll blame anything on a vaccine.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
oh,
me
this
too.
is the problem. You're constipated. It's a vaccine.
Right.
You had a headache yesterday. It was some vaccine. But I think that is where, you know, when COVID rolled out, and so for your listeners, my husband's an interventional cardiologist, was chief of cardiology for the largest healthcare system in the state of Pennsylvania. And when COVID vaccines were being rolled out, he was very adamant. I am not anti-vaccine, he would say. He's like, that's my wife. He's like, I'm anti being told what must be injected into my body. He was in the military, you know, many, many years ago. So he's been like a pincushion when it came to vaccines. But as COVID unfolded, I will say, I think that's one of the really good things. I say that all the time. One of the really good things that came out of COVID is the exposure of this corruption. And I would say, hey, you know, Fauci was in the helm 40 years ago, you know, no difference from what we're seeing now. So I think COVID, what I will say is I feel like it really has exposed the level of corruption and how none of these vaccines are safe. And so my husband read cover to cover The Truth About Anthony Fauci, and I always joke his pendulum swung. He's now come around to my way of thinking of like, yeah, no.
And I know he's a physician. Mm-hmm. But that book's a doozy. Yeah. I have it, and I'm like slowly.
I always say I get through about 3 sentences at a time. Then I'm like, okay. So yeah, no, he did. But that's him too. So reading it cover to cover. Yeah, and so anyway, along with that.
I'm sorry, I was just gonna say, like, what we've had some conversations, but like, can you like give us a little taste of what he has seen in his practice post-COVID?
Yeah, so, well, as a result of it, I mean, corporate medicine is corporate. So he left corporate medicine April of 2023. Mm-hmm. You know, it was one of those decisions in our household of I can ride this out for the next 7.5 years until retirement, have a good gig, you know, do work that I love, compensated very well, or do what I feel in my heart is the right thing for patient care and do my own thing, which is ultimately what he decided. So I think COVID also really exposed a lot to him, you know, thinking, here I am, I'm supposed to be working with some of the brightest minds, right, in medicine, and they're complete idiots. They're just ducking their head in the sand and things like that. And then also, you know, when you're saying like, hey, what are you seeing? Post-COVID vaccination, you know, these, you know, young, healthy 35-year-olds coming in with, you know, massive blood clots, which is what one of the things he treats, and being like, well, this isn't normal. And the person saying, oh, and he was the only one willing to ask too.
Yeah.
Were you vaccinated recently? And, oh yeah, I just got vaccinated, you know, 3 days ago, or, oh, I just had my second shot 2 weeks ago. And so he was really kind of on the forefront of like making sure that that was documented, and that was really he was really trying to be silenced with that as well. Mm-hmm. So, and that's where I would say he's very much, he's a honey badger. That's what I always say. He's a honey badger when it comes to that kind of stuff. And I'm super proud of him because it's not been easy, you know, in the world of medicine and anything that's already corporate like medicine is in our country, to go out, as we've seen with all of those really great doctors who have been, you know, silenced. You know, I think one of the things, and I'm not sure if you had heard this or not, but I thought it was like excellent, was Dr. McCullough having come out and said no childhood vaccines.
Yeah.
And I thought that, I was like, oh, that's interesting. I want to listen to this interview as to why he felt this way, you know? And I was like, it makes perfect sense. He said, we saw what was happening with the COVID vaccines. Mm-hmm. and no one wanted to acknowledge it. And even with all of the adverse events happening with post-COVID vaccination in every age group, it still went on the childhood schedule. And that made me think, if they're willing to put the COVID vaccine on the childhood schedule, how else did they come to the decisions to put all these other ones on too? And I just thought that was a really great way to say it.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely.
Did you hear that interview? Did you hear that interview?
I did.
How he came to that?
I did.
Yeah. So, anyway, I think all of it, having said all that with COVID, is like, I will say this a lot too to people, is that I feel like it has really been vindicating for parents like you, you know, who as we've talked before, you know, it's vaccine injury, you know, this is autism caused by vaccine injury, or, you know, things like that. I think it's really been vindicating to those parents who've said, see, I knew it, you know, do you believe me now, kind of thing.
It is true. Do you believe me now? Because it's been 19 years, because I'm going to include Aiden in that.
Yeah.
Aiden, as you know, was also very much affected and regressed within a month. His was MMR, and I'm not by any stretch trying to minimize what Aiden went through. I just really want to focus on Colin and his what his challenges are and his peer group. Mm-hmm. Aiden was one of the really lucky ones. Mm-hmm. And he somehow, some way, through all the interventions and, you know, approaches that we took along the way, was able to, dare I say, overcome, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, he doesn't have a clinical diagnosis of autism any longer. Mm-hmm. He does have social emotional deficits and ADHD, and he's, you know, very open about all of that. But what he went through from 16 months to, it's even hard to put a timeline on it, but he certainly wasn't, he wasn't going through what his brother was going through. He did gain his language back. He never had seizures. Like, thank God for all of that. But, like, even today, in year one of college, like, he still has a really hard time socially, emotionally. And that is with years of therapy. You know, that's with working with you. That's with working with other alternative doctors. That's with ADHD coach, and like he has like a really wonderful group of people around him, helping to support that piece going through life. But nothing will take away of the fact that he literally lost all his skills after the MMR. But in terms of Colin, he never even got the MMR, because if it happened with child A, it doesn't, for me, take a rocket scientist to figure the probability of it happening with child B is pretty high. I mean, they even said, okay, let's just pretend this wasn't vaccine injury. Let's just say, oh, they were just born with autism, which we know they weren't, but let's just say that. You know, all of the autism centers, you know, what are they called? CARD, Center for Autism and Related Disorders. They always say if you have one child diagnosed with autism, there's a 10% chance that your second child will be diagnosed with autism. But that was almost 20 years ago, so I don't even know what the stat is right now. But my point is when you're looking at something like that, 10% is pretty high risk, right?
Yeah.
And so I did what I knew best at the time, keeping in mind that the boys are only 19 months apart. And when Aiden was diagnosed with the progressive autism, that Colin was 6 weeks old. It was a really challenging emotional time. And I learned as much as I could, as quickly as I could. I definitely had a great neurologist who diagnosed Aiden got on the phone with Card, was able to get him into the early intervention program. He started right on his second birthday. And I had learned all these things, like about the dairy-free, gluten-free, all of that the neurologist was able to help me with, 17 years ago. So out of the gate, I had some great supports. But again, not being able to understand and wrap my brain around the severity and the depth and the scope of these vaccines and the damage that they can cause. So even with avoiding the MMR, I spaced everything out. And it was literally one vaccine at a time. As you know, you have a copy of his vaccine record. And what I didn't understand then that I so clearly see now, it's like second nature to me. But it might be one vaccine, like one shot. But there's 3 things in there. Not to mention all of the adjuvants and the random ingredients that they put in there.
Lord only knows what's in there. Yeah. Right.
But fetal cells, peanuts, eggs, like random stuff. It's like, I mean, that again, it's like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize why, like, peanut allergies and eggs.
Right. I was going to say,
and
we're talking about like the vaccine injury and autism, but it's just like, allergies, asthma. It's like, how do we have such a population, a generation of all this too? And
ADHD being through the roof.
ADHD,
Alzheimer's, right? It's like it never ends.
And what I will see in my practice is the kiddos who have not received any vaccines, even within the same family. So let's say, for example, Aiden went through what Aiden went through, and you were like, oh, no way, Colin's not getting anything, right? So I have families like that. Those unvaccinated kids, well, I don't see them,
Yeah.
I don't see them. And I had one little baby. The older sister was injured by a flu vaccine. So then mom was like, nope, no more, not doing this again. And then had a baby, had the older daughter in for an appointment with me, had the baby, and this baby's skin was just like butter. It was just like and the mom even said, I feel so much guilt over how healthy this baby is compared to my other 2 girls. And she goes, I have to just think it's vaccines. Like, what else could it be? The same parents, same, all 3 girls, not like boys, girls, and so I will say I didn't have much hope before COVID. I have more hope now moving forward about people's eyes being wide open and being more willing to take a stand, and more just uprising, so to speak.
I have to say that I never thought in my lifetime that I would see the uprising and the awareness and the skepticism and the critical thinking all coming to life. And you're right, there is validation, because not only did the world not believe us, but most of the people in our inner circle didn't.
Right, even within families.
And it's very hurtful.
Yeah, how could it not be?
Because if you say my child was diagnosed with celiac, or you say my child has a peanut allergy, I'm just grabbing anything, you take that at face value.
Yep.
When you say my child had a horrific reaction of vaccines, and now they've put this label on it because of the symptoms that they have as a result of the reaction. Oh, no, it wasn't the vaccine. It couldn't have been the vaccine.
Right.
And this was years and years and years and years. And I know we don't want to get too heavy into a political discussion, because then you and I are really in left field with that. But the only person who believed us, read the science, researched it, interviewed families, met children, stood beside us, represented in court, and spoke up publicly was Bobby Kennedy.
Yep. Yep.
And I am thrilled that he's running for president.
Yeah. Well, and he had no skin in the game. He would have no reason to be like,
yeah,
hey, you know, I think that's what really kind of, I think is so cool about him too, is that, you know, we've talked before about how I ended up doing what I do, you know, but I've never known that about him. It's not like he, as far as I know, had a child that, you know, got the MMR or got a DTaP or a HIB or whatever and regressed into autism, you know. Yeah. So I was just always really thought that was really cool of him, of like, wow, he's taken such an interest in this, as in like, what, an environmental attorney or whatever, and being a Kennedy, and like, he would have nothing to gain. He has nothing to gain.
I think the link for him, when the mom approached him all those years ago, was the environmental piece. You nailed it, because at that time there was still mercury in vaccines.
Gotcha.
Well, and it still is.
Yeah, it still is.
No matter what they say. But look at the cost. Look at the cost at parents with vaccine-injured children, for us to be sort of validated for what we were trying to tell people, not for any other reason, but because we didn't want to see anyone else go through what we went through.
Absolutely.
The fallout from COVID was the cost. Mm-hmm. And you know how this goes. We won't even know the real damage until the history, until way into the history.
Right. I will say too, in my office, one of the things, other shifts that I've seen with this in a good way, is before COVID, and even when COVID was hitting, and things like that. So I have all kinds of, you know, informational articles out, you know, whether it's from Dr. Mercola, whether it's from Children's Health Defense, whether it's from the High Wire, whatever it is. And so I print out that stuff on a weekly basis, have it in my waiting room, have it in my office, and patients, you know, or the professional center where I'm in, people would just walk in and they'd be like, how comes I don't see this information anywhere else?
Yeah.
How is this information not anywhere else? And I go, well, because this information doesn't make money. You know, that's one shift that now I will say, patients coming in or people coming into my wellness center, that information is now more freely out there. Yes. They're not only just seeing it in my office. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think that's been good too, because I think places like the High Wire, you know, and Dell, and, you know, the Dr. Pierre Corey and, you know, Dr. McCullough, and like all of them are really able to be a really big voice to get this information out.
Yeah. I mean, there's some of the most well-respected physicians in the world have been brave enough. Mm-hmm. And of course it doesn't make mainstream, but gradually I think it's starting to trickle over.
Yeah.
And I do think, you know, Robert F. Kennedy is helping that also.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree.
And one of the people that we crossed paths with early on at Kennedy Krieger was Dr. Kelly, Dr. Richard Kelly. I don't know if that name rings a bell for you or not, but he worked at CARD in Baltimore, and I think maybe the head of the metabolic lab. I can't quite remember. It's been so many years. And he is a lovely, sweet man. Mm-hmm. But it is very bittersweet thinking about him, because when Aiden's reaction happened, that was in 2004. Colin's was in 2006. And if I haven't said it before, or even if I have, I'm going to say it again. Colin's reaction was immediate. It was literally immediate. He literally lost all of the skills. You think about those milestone charts, and he was being followed by Kennedy Krieger. gone, wiped out. 10 words he had, gone. He was almost just like, for the next 3 or 4 weeks after his DTaP vaccine, just like this. God bless, just little human heart existing and not knowing anything around him. It was literally my heart broke in half when that happened. But getting back to Dr. Kelly, and the reason I bring him up and the bittersweetness of all that is he was actually appointed by the state as their expert witness in vaccine court. So, like, quick history for the listeners, when Reagan was president, the pharmaceutical company basically went to his administration and said, hey, we're getting sued too often. So either we have to find a way to not get sued, or I guess they were pretty much holding up the healthcare model as the dangling carrot or whatever. We're not going to manufacture these vaccines anymore. And we can't have that, right? Because of the science, because of med school, because of... So what happened with that was they came up with the 1986 Vaccine Act and basically gave vaccine manufacturers free immunity.
Yeah.
And then what it did was create a government-run vaccine court. I have friends whose case has been in the vaccine court for over 20 years. Their kids are like 23 now. And nothing, right? They're still waiting their trial within their government-run circle. It's also a conflict of interest.
And I don't know if this is still the case too. The last number that I had known was a maximum payout of $250,000. If you want, that was like the max, like that you could get for a vaccine injury payout. Yes, $250,000 is a lot of money, but as you know, the services, all that is required, your life, I mean, $250,000 for a child that's going to be in diapers the rest of their life, or I don't know, I could go on and on about it. That was one thing that always stuck in my mind, and that people didn't realize, and maybe people still don't realize that, and the number may have changed as well, that 75 cents from each vaccine goes into that pot for vaccine court. So an MMR, which is a 3-in-1, right? Measles, mumps, rubella. So from that one shot, $2.25 goes into the pot. So every time you're getting a vaccine, and I don't think they ever give just one. Yeah, you're not just throwing 75 cents into the pot. So that money within the vaccines is going into this court to pay out. I was, until just a few weeks ago, very much repeal 1986, right? Like repeal the act. I will say that I have changed my mind on that, and that was based off an interview with Dell, and I can't think of her name right now, but she wrote the book A Shot in the Dark about DTaP. She was the mom who was the main person going and trying to get some type of bill passed for this vaccine injury court. I listened to an extensive interview with her and Dell that Dell had done, and I walked away from that interview feeling differently, because she made some really good points as to this is the only bill in our entire country that has any type of protection for vaccine injury. And if you get rid of that, you have nothing. So I think that interview is definitely worth listening to.
Absolutely.
Because she goes back, because she, again, I'll go to, no matter how flat you make a pancake, there's always two sides.
Yes.
And hearing her side of things as a vaccine injured parent, going through this and that uphill battle of the resistance that was met, every step of the way, and to then get this. Now, what she will say is that there needs to be adjustments. That's, like you mentioned, someone that's been in vaccine court for 20 years. No, that was never the intention. It was supposed to be a swift process. So that goes back to what you were talking to, this whole conflict of interest. We have a government-run vaccine program holding a government-run vaccine injury court. Like, you just can't. Definitely, I would say things that absolutely need change. There needs to be some swiftness to the process.
Absolutely. All valid points. I'm really glad that you brought that up. The biggest thing that needs to happen is the liability going back to pharma, but how on earth can we do something like that at this point?
Right.
You know?
Right.
But
you're right. Yeah.
Getting back to Dr. Kelly, he was the expert witness. He then would show up to court and do his thing, and he, was obviously honest every time he was on that stand, to the best of our knowledge. But he did find a subset of kids in his lab, who he followed, who had mitochondria dysfunction, who, after being vaccinated, were diagnosed with autism. So it was a direct link.
Correlation doesn't mean causation.
Yes. So no, it's not it's like a direct link, right? Mitochondria dysfunction or mitochondria disease, vaccine, autism. And he had all the data. And he brought that to their attention on a Friday somewhere. I don't remember the exact date. It might have been late 80s, early 90s. And he was dismissed from his position as the expert witness.
Yeah, so look at that. You're saying the 80s, 90s, this is how far back that I always say. This is.
Now, the bittersweet part, the sad part, is that we saw Dr. Kelly in 2006, like the beginning of 2006 with Aiden. And I literally flat out asked him at Kennedy Krieger, I can visualize the room, the desk where he was sitting. And I said, Dr. Kelly, do you think any of this has to do with vaccines? And he said, there is no science that backs that up. And if he just could have told me or wrote it on a piece of paper, right, signed it to me, anything.
Spell to communicate.
Right, exactly. Bring out the damn letterboard. Off the record. I've seen it. I've witnessed it in my lab with my patients.
Slip you a little something, folded paper. Yeah.
But it's not no knowledge yet because it hasn't. Because you know how it takes to get printed in those medical journals. But he didn't.
Right. And again,
and that could have stopped me from vaccinating Colin.
And I think that's where we're starting to see, hopefully, a shift in physicians who are willing to get out of corporate.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's always been my husband and my thing is like, we have got to put our head on our pillows at night knowing we've done the right thing, you know? And so that, again, it's that whole medical legal world. It's all a CYA world. And that's, unfortunately, it sounds like that's what he was doing. He knew if he let you know in any uncertain terms that there was a correlation, he would be fired. He wouldn't have his job. And that's the sadness in all of it.
And he has since, I think it was a year and a half, 2 years ago. Again, time's really difficult when you're in this life. It's all like a big blur. But he has written and signed an affidavit that explains his findings. And I think Dell actually interviewed him.
Oh, okay. I'd have to go back.
But for anyone listening who was like, yeah, right. No, it's out there. Google it. You know, it might be a little hard to find because of censorship.
Google.
But it's out there, and I'm just glad that he finally did the right thing.
Yeah.
And came public with it because that was buried.
Yeah.
If people who've been listening to my podcast long enough have known the challenges that our families go through and what my son goes through. And this is really the why and how it got started. And it's been hard for me to get to the point to publicly do this because it's emotional. There's a ton of guilt. Yeah, I do feel solely responsible. I signed that paper saying he could get it, but information was withheld.
Right.
I mean, so I will have to work that out for as long as I live.
I think one of the other things, though, too, just to interject there, too, as a mom, and, that mom guilt, and, that's one of the things that I always say to you, too, is follow your mom gut. Like, when you ask me something for Colin, and I'll be like, here, but what's your mom gut telling you? Because I do believe mom knows best, and follow that mom gut. I tell all my patients that never ignore it. If you're feeling something in that mom gut for your child, follow it. It's never wrong. It's never wrong. I think the other thing as women, where we are so vulnerable in this situation, and that's why I will work with my patients who are pregnant on really having a birth plan, and it's like in stone, like 500 copies of this birth plan, and make sure you go over it with everybody, because most people that are coming to see me do not want their children vaccinated at this point, kind of thing. So when we're coming up with birth plans, if they plan to do a traditional birth in a hospital setting, no Hep B, no eye gunk. I think getting back to us as women and that vulnerability, like when you were saying, Colin's 6 weeks old, Aiden's like, you're a postpartum hormonal hot mess, right? At least I was.
Absolutely.
And you're not thinking clearly. And also, even if you are pre-planning while you're pregnant, pregnancy hormones, you're not thinking clearly, so you don't really know what you're going into, and then you're like, okay, you're telling me this is what's best for my baby. Oh my golly, of course I'm going to do whatever is best for my baby. So I always say, like, with that guilt, like we've all had it, but we were duped too.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, my story's a little bit different. With our oldest, who we adopted from Guatemala, I was at the mercy of a third world government.
Yeah.
And then took almost a year. We brought him home on U.S. soil 1 week before he was 12 months old. But while I was living over there with him, then looking back, could see, gee, she got sick every time after he had a vaccination. Brought him home. I think I'd have to look at the exact records, around 15 months, got that first MMR. We've talked about this, was very high fever, bright red, rash all the way, that's a band around his head. Couldn't lift his head, and I was like, there's something wrong. And my husband at the time was an internist, an internal medicine physician, and our friend was the family doctor. So he said, well, let's go over to their house and just have them, checked out, because we were new parents. We didn't, and here we had just taken a year. We have our kid home on U.S. soil, and all that goes along with that. Adoption's a whole other, a whole other podcast. So anyway, our friend, and, she was family doctor. She's like, oh, well, didn't we just give some vaccines? Like, this is normal. And I knew in my mom got right then and there, this is not normal. This is not normal, and never again. And I've said this to you before, too. I feel that if we would have continued to vaccinate our oldest, he would not be functioning the way he does. Now he's a high school senior. He's going off to college in the fall. He just got back from a missions trip in the Dominican 2 weeks ago. He would be like this population that we're dealing with your podcast. Why you have this podcast?
Yeah.
So
how many vaccines did he get?
So when we were in Guatemala, they follow the same schedule that the U.S. does.
Okay.
So he would have gotten maybe not quite as many in that first year.
Mm-hmm.
But some, again, corruption and adoption and all of that with some of these countries. Now, they didn't with Guatemala, but some of these countries, when you bring the child onto U.S. soil, they make you repeat.
Oh, my God.
Right? Yeah.
Jesus.
And then, you know, again, we won't go down that whole rabbit trail, but third world countries, like I was in Guatemala, they get like the worst of the worst vaccines, like as if vaccines aren't bad enough. And, you know, we know that they'll disperse lots. You know, you're going to have a lot that's going to go of an MMR from the same lot. You're going to have that go out to Michigan. You're going to have it go to Florida. You're going to spread it out, because if you have a cluster of kids who, you know, in 1 month's time all, you know, end up with whatever coming out of Michigan, you're going to go, well, what did they all get? Yeah. Right? Yeah. Whereas when you disperse that, and then you only have a couple kids coming out of Michigan, California, Rhode Island, Texas from the same lot, they're not going to know it's the same lot. So anyway.
The average person would never even think of something like that.
Right. Well, and I never thought of something like that either until I was like, what's going on with my kid? But anyway, but these third world countries then, you know, get a bad batch, you get a little too much aluminum in there, you get a little too much fetal cell in there, I'll just ship it to a third world country.
The last point I want to make is tying up loose ends by just paralleling like the current vaccine schedule with what our parents had. And they are...
Or even what we had.
or yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. Like I know my parents had 2. Mm-hmm. I had, I think, 8 spread out over the course of 10 years. Aiden and Colin, in 14, 15 months, 20-some.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the heavy hitters are, well, first of all, Hep B at birth is just insanity.
Yes.
I mean, it's just insanity.
Yeah.
And that's what I'll say with some of my parents who are planning, who have fear. We have these gentle, I try to be as gentle as I can, conversations, you know, and they'll say, well, you know, they said about getting Hep B. I'm like, are you a prostitute? Are you doing drugs? Are you all sleeping around on each other? Because if that's not the case, your kid doesn't need this Hep B within the first 24 hours that they've come out of your womb, right? Yeah. So when you start phrasing it to people like that, and unfortunately, that's kind of where we've got to go. We've got to kind of talk some sense into, like, does this make sense? What this vaccine is for.
This make sense, right?
And then they're like, oh, yeah, no. And then they get insulted that somebody wouldn't want to actually give their child that.
If they only knew the ACIP group that were making the decisions.
Oh, my golly. Like.
It's just mind-blowing and disgusting.
Unbelievable. Disgusting is the word that comes to mind. But when we look at that schedule, too, even just from 0 to 18, it's insane. But I always say, when I'm working body codes and especially with kids who are vaccine injured, whatever that injury looks like, I'm a big believer that if you've even received one vaccine, you have an injury of some sort.
Yeah.
There just is.
I agree.
But a lot of times I will see it in my practice cluster around 2 months old or 4 months old or 6 months old, because those are big heavy hitter times. Or 4 months too is a big one, because they've gotten this whole slew at 2 months. Then you go and give them this whole slew at 4 months, and then the body's just, these little beings are just like, I can't take this, you know? And then like that 12 to 15 months where they want to give that first varicella and the first, you know, MMR.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the schedule's just...
And it comes out. It's very clear in the reports that you give me with Colin. The data is very clear of the time frames.
Right. And sometimes what goes along with that toxicity, aluminum toxicity, you know, physical trauma, physical emotional, the emotional piece of it, when these kids are, you know, trapping emotions such as terror and fear, betrayal, you know, kind of thing. It all ties in. But I think that's the hope that we have hope in, as we see how I see, you know, not just Colin, but in my practice, how healing can occur, and that there are really good modalities out there to help for healing to occur.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just wanted to thank you for sitting with me and helping me share my story.
Yeah, thanks
for supporting my family all these years and being such a sweet, lovely friend and really a mentor, because you've taught me so much too.
Well, I feel like you you taught me so much. Colin taught me so much, and just even continues to, as we still navigate, these swirling
they
waters.
are our teachers.
Yep.
Because we don't know what they're going through. And I will spend the rest of my natural born life working on healing this child, keeping, myself and my other son healthy, and hopefully leaving an impact or a mark so that this madness can eventually stop in whatever way that, that unfolds. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing your story. I think it's people like you whose voices are going to be heard loud and clear because your delivery is so good. I always think about that. I'm like, Diana's so peaceful and gentle. Where I'm like, I get a little defensive with, stuff with Colin. I get a little defensive.
Get me in the right room with some of the groups that we've discussed today.
Yeah.
And you would see the other side of me. But, we can't live in that space.
Yeah, no.
Right?
No. And that's what I always say, too, with when we talked about Colin's schooling early on. The goal should be, the goal should be take where you're at and move you forward. And I think that's the cool thing for me with Colin. I know you're in the thick of it every day, but man, that kid has come leaps and bounds.
He has.
From when we first started working together. I think about when we first started working together for Colin, he was having SIBs multiple times a day. I mean, it was not uncommon for the biting and all of that, and the aggressions and the kicking the holes in the wall and the windshield and the windows, and that was commonplace. And then we got to the point of it kept getting spread out. That wasn't happening. There, when we got to the point of it'd be several months, and it'd be you'd reach out and be like, oh, Colin it was a high anxiety situation, and he bit, and he feels so remorseful. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we haven't had that in so long, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what's so cool, is that we see that all that you have done to help your child, all these different modalities put in place, he has been helped, and he will continue to be helped. I think that's where,
Yeah. Agreed. There was a lot of destruction in the past, and we are past that, and I'm so grateful. We have an open dialogue, and he wants to be healthy.
Yeah.
He even spelled. It was 2 months ago, and I record everything in our sessions. He even spelled getting vaccinated was a big mistake, and it broke my heart. I probably shared that with you, but it's he knows.
Yeah.
He knows everything, and he's working really hard to get healthy and be healthy, because he loves life. He loves music. He loves things. He wants to travel.
Yeah.
He has all the things that we have, these aspirations. So I'll make sure everything I can in my power, and God's help and my village's help, that we just live a beautiful, fulfilled life, because he deserves it. And they all do.
Yep, for sure.